Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a super casual chatty Q&A. I feel like I've just hit the vlogs super hard on my channel as of late and haven't sat down and had a longer conversation with you guys in a while, so I wanted to film this video today. If any of you are stumbling onto this video for the first time, my name is Amy. I am 24 years old. I work full-time as a graphic designer for a real estate agency and make YouTube videos on the side, kind of documenting my everyday life in DC. So I feel like that's kind of like the quick elevator pitch of my channel and probably just helpful background for any of the questions that I'm answering and stuff like that. But I went ahead and asked you guys for questions on Instagram and you guys came through. So I'm gonna go ahead and answer a couple of these today. And if you guys want a part 2 or anything like that, we can go from there. So I'm also gonna try to hit the questions that I got more than once, just so that more people's questions are answered, I guess. But the first one that I saw a couple of times was, how do I feel about DC potentially becoming a state? And I feel really good about that. Like, if it was my decision, obviously we would be. I think it's kind of insane that DC isn't a state. DC has a higher population than multiple states in the US, and it's a super diverse city that really would benefit from representation, I think. But do I think DC should be a state and do I think it's gonna get passed through the Senate are two different answers. I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if it got passed, just because I feel like a lot of more progressive things have been getting passed and it's not a really controversial issue. Like, it's not a super clear partied issue in my opinion. Obviously I'm aware that it leans more left, but I guess, I mean, it's not something that typical Democrats are basing campaigns off of, or something that people really speak on often. So I'm optimistic, not expecting it to get passed, but I think the fact that it's made it this far is a good sign, and maybe if it doesn't get passed this time, it will next time. Someone asked, is driving and parking in DC stressful? And I would say moderately stressful. I grew up in Northern Virginia, so I feel like I've always driven a little bit more on the aggressive side. I'm not an aggressive driver, I would say, but that doesn't necessarily scare me, where I feel like friends that live here from out of state always get a little bit more hesitant in the car. So I'm kind of used to the pace of driving here, so I don't find that inherently stressful, but I do think parking is a pain in the ass. It's super difficult to find. In non-COVID times when parking's being enforced, the signs are so confusing. There'll be like 6 different signs stacked on one another, and it's normally like a 50-50 shot if you can park there. Parking is also so expensive here, especially if you're looking at permits for apartment buildings. I know mine is, I think, $250 a month for my apartment, so I have zoned parking on the street, which 99% of the time is fine, but again, once COVID ends and they start enforcing parking, it's going to get a lot more difficult. I unfortunately was towed the other day. It was totally my fault. If my dad is watching this, I didn't get towed. Actually, it's a total lie. Doesn't sound like me. So that was, again, it was entirely my fault, but such a pain in the ass to have to go get it back and just such unnecessary money to spend. And I don't know if it's like this in all cities, but in DC, normally when you get towed, you also get a ticket. So I had to pay, I think it was $140 to get my car yesterday. And then I still owe the government money for the ticket. So it's not great. The parking situation is not great. That's how I'm gonna leave it. There were a lot of questions if I plan to stay in DC forever or when I'm moving, how long I want to be here, kind of everything under that realm. And honestly, I have no idea. I think I could definitely see myself here long term. I would love to buy a place here at some point in the next like 5 years, which is completely unrealistic. Like, let's not get that twisted. That is not necessarily a realistic goal for me at this point. And then if I end up moving, I could just rent it out or, you know, like sublease it essentially until I move back. But I definitely could see myself staying here long term. I'm definitely not opposed to going somewhere else for a couple years and then coming back. I always tell people my like plan right now is like desolate beach town for 2 years. Like, I want to live in like a small remote beach town, like very local, very quiet, serene, warm, chill girl vibes for like 2 years and then come back to the city. But I also never thought I'd end up here. So I don't think it's really worth planning just because I don't know where job opportunities or people or, you know, whatever opportunities are gonna take me. That was another question I got a lot was, did I pick DC? Did I just kind of stumble into my job? And I totally stumbled into it. I was never against DC, but it wasn't something that I was applying for multiple jobs here. The summer before my senior year, I was applying to like probably 60 plus internships pretty vastly across the US. And I got 2 offers, one in North Carolina, one in DC. And the one in DC was for a real estate company. The one in North Carolina was for a creative agency, which on paper made so much more sense for a graphic design major. But when I went to my final interview at the one in North Carolina, I just wasn't impressed with their portfolio. I remember looking at their work and thinking that it just wasn't good. And if I was thinking that as someone who was going into their senior year of college, really didn't have a ton of professional experience, like that was a red flag for me. And then when I did my final interview at the company that I ended up working for full time, I was just so impressed by the graphic designer there at the time. I really loved her design style and I looked up to her a lot as like a mentor. So that ended up just being the perfect position for me. And then I ended up getting a full-time offer before I went back for my senior year, which I feel like is very rare for communication-based jobs. I think that's more typical for like the finance side of things. So I didn't necessarily seek out DC. I think if I didn't have that job offer and internship experience, I probably would have gone to New York just because so many of my friends did. And I feel like that was the more clear-cut path from Elon where I went to undergrad. But I'm so glad that I'm here and I think everything works out for a reason. So multiple people asked about Zekes Coffee, if it was like a local spot or if it's always busy. Other like coffee shops that I go to, if that's the only one I go to. And that made me so happy. I freaking love Zekes, you guys know that. I know that that's a common critique of my channel, that I only go to my 9 to 5 and get Zekes Coffee, which is a solid 93% of my life. So I get it, it's a fair critique. But Zekes is great. I would say it's a little bit more of a local spot right now than it would be if we didn't hit COVID, just because it's so close. The one downtown at least is so close to the White House that I think when things are open and normal, they get a lot of foot traffic just being on 15th Street. So I'd say it's somewhere in between being like a local hidden gem and a tourist attraction. Like I don't think it's somewhere that people think of when they think of DC unless they watch this channel, which is a pretty like niche set of people. But if you're in DC, I couldn't recommend it more, obviously. My go-to order is normally like a cold brew or a latte when they have the honey lavender latte. Very few things bring me more joy than when I go to my Instagram requests and see that you guys are sending me pictures of trying Zekes or like visiting DC and going to Zekes. I love that shit, so please always do that if you end up going. I just love them so much and love supporting local business, so Zekes will always be number 1 in my heart. There were also a lot of questions about Leo. He's doing well. I'm sure he's really excited that I'm picking him up right now. He's a full-grown man. He's, I think, officially 1 when you guys are seeing this. It's hard because he was adopted. They don't know the exact date that he was born, but they kind of estimated it sometime in April of last year. So I think he's a full-grown man at this point. He clearly does not love being on camera, but as a whole, he's doing really well. I feel like he's gotten a lot better with like having guests in my apartment or like sleeping through the night. As a whole, he's recognizing more people like as they come over, and I think that that's just like as it gets safer to hang out with people and have people in my apartment, like he's starting to recognize more and more people, which is really cute to see. He's just licking himself right now. He's being a good little egg. This one was pretty niche, but someone asked the best pretzel and beer cheese place in DC, because I think I mentioned this really quickly either in a Q&A or a vlog, but me and my friend Celia are on a mission to find the best beer cheese and pretzels in DC, and so far my favorite has been, I think it's called Beer House on H Street. It's like H Street corridor area. Incredible beer cheese. It was like, I hate to say life-changing, but like it kind of was. So take that for what it is. A few of you asked how living alone was going, if it was hard living alone in a pandemic, if I preferred living alone compared to roommates. And I think if I was working from home full time, I would not like living alone. I basically did that all of December and January just because of COVID restrictions in DC, and then the insurrection kept me from going to work for a couple of weeks. So that was cute. And that was pretty hard, honestly, just because I felt so isolated in my apartment. There'd be days where I just wouldn't have any meetings on my calendar because at that point I was still the only person in my department and I work pretty independently. So there'd be days where I just wouldn't talk to anybody. I wouldn't have any meetings where I had to talk to people. The camera just stopped recording for a second. But those like 4 or 6 weeks that I was working from home alone were not ideal. I just feel like I was super lonely. I'm super extroverted and didn't love that, but because I am back full time, I feel like that helps a lot, just having a routine, going somewhere, like talking to my coworkers. And even if I'm not talking to them, like we have a very open office layout, just like overhearing people in the distance on phone calls or just like almost white noise that isn't your apartment is very comforting for some reason. So I think if I was working from home full time and we were still in that period of COVID where nobody could hang out, like you really couldn't even hang out outside because it was too cold, nobody was vaccinated yet, I would really struggle living alone. But in this current state, I do really like it. Someone asked, do you follow Overheard in DC? If you do you think they're accurate or funny? I thought this was a really funny question. I do follow them and I'd say they're pretty accurate. I feel like any of the Overheard accounts are obviously like very dramatic statements, or it's like things get submitted that you say to your friend when you're being dumb on purpose, like you're over exaggerating a story to make it funny. But behind most jokes are like a decent amount of truth. But I do think all the jokes about like consultants or crossing the river and going to Arlington for dates are really funny. It's just like a funny community joke, I guess. And I think accounts like that are really good for stuff like that, or jokes about like the metro running late, or, you know, things like that. I think some people take accounts like that a little too seriously. I think they're just meant to be like playful and like a light-hearted way to break up tension, especially living in DC. So I always appreciate following them and think they're funny. I feel like I've been talking for quite a bit, so the last question I'm going to answer is if I have any travel plans for this year. I have my first travel plans in about 18 months, which is so crazy. It's something that I've gone back and forth on a lot, if it's like okay to travel. I'm fully vaxxed at this point. I've had my 2 weeks immunity and will be pretty far past that by the time I actually go anywhere. I really haven't left DC since I think October or November of 2019. I've gone home to visit my parents a couple of times, but they're in Northern Virginia. Like that doesn't necessarily feel like traveling in my opinion, especially going by car and, you know, being very safe about it. But I did book a trip to visit my friend Jessie in Utah coming up, which I am so excited about. I feel like I just desperately need to see a new landscape, a new person, just like a new experience, even if it's very low-key and calm. I was debating even talking about it on my channel just because I'm really scared of getting canceled for traveling. But like I said, I'm fully vaccinated, so is she, so are all of her roommates. I've been looking at the CDC guidelines for travel, for DC, for Utah, for Colorado, where my flight layover is, and obviously gonna wear a mask the entire time, be really cognizant of my surroundings and just being respectful of everyone there because I am a guest. But I think it's gonna be a pretty low-key trip, just like us mainly hanging out outside and like hiking. And I think it's just gonna be really good for me and I'm so excited for it. So that's coming up at the end of the month, which I'm again just so beyond excited for. And then I'd love to go to the beach at some point this year. I don't have anything set in stone, but I assume like maybe like an August bop we could go to the beach. I want to go to New York when it's safe, and visit all of my friends there, but nothing absolutely crazy. I doubt any international travel anytime soon, just because that still seems a little bit dicey and a little bit more dangerous compared to domestic travel, I guess. But yeah, I think that that is everything that I'm going to be answering this week. I feel like I've been rambling for long enough. If you guys want to see a part 2 to this, like I said, let me know down below in the comment section. I definitely have plenty of questions for a part 2 or a part 3. If you have any other video suggestions, feel free to leave those down below as well. I love hearing from you guys and hearing what you guys want to see. And yeah, I think that that's everything for this week's video. Thank you guys so much for watching and for all of your support as always, and I will see you next week. Bye.